Before that, I have a question about Ireland. I had the great pleasure of being back in Ireland for the first time in many, many years recently on assignment for the Nation magazine, and I was there for the 100th anniversary of the so-called Easter Rising, 1916. The first armed rebellion against colonial rule of the 20th century, I think. And what was so striking to me was it's 100 years, right? So there have been many anniversaries. In every instance, until this one, the main thrust of the debate, in Ireland anyway, was whether the uprising was justified, whether the civilian deaths could be justified, how long had this delayed independence for. The southern state, the Irish state, had laid it on very heavy, and the debate had taken place in a very far, I would say, a very conservative part of the spectrum politically. This time, the complete opposite. Most people claiming the legacy not just of the rebels, but of the left flank of the rebels, particularly the James Connollys, those who talked about socialism, of anti-nationalism and fighting empire. You saw a lot of focus on the women rebels, who at the same time were nurses and doctors, but also snipers and fighters. My question to you is, one of the things I saw happening in Ireland that was exciting was just about every school child had been asked to write their own proclamation for 2016, and been asked to consider what would their republic of the 21st century look like. I wonder to what extent you see exercises like this happening in the countries that you're talking about, or if you have any suggestions of how we could go about really visualizing the future that we want to make, because presumably we need to start making it now rather than waiting for someone to hand it down to us.
Well, the Irish situation, the 1916 anniversary took place at a time where Ireland is confronting a huge economic crisis, and where the European Union has imposed on it a set of laws which do not allow the Irish to carry out any spending without permission from Brussels, including on culture. And this is felt, of course, all over the country. Secondly, the European Union rules insist on privatization, which is what their economists have been advising the Irish. The water privatization, the defeat of it by a mass popular movement, brought about the fall of the government, which was huge. Secondly, a number of radical left-wing socialist candidates have been elected for the first time in Northern Ireland to the Belfast Parliament, a group called People Before Profits. Two of their main campaigners were elected to Parliament. Likewise, the water campaigners and other radicals have been elected into the Parliament in Dublin and are playing a very good role by refusing to take sides in the old wars between the Irish political parties. Look, Ireland has a very special history, as you know, Laura, and each country has to rely and depend on its own history and the precedents in these countries and bring them back to life. Here, of course, very few people talk about the slave rebellions. All of the groups of, small groups but important groups of whites who helped these rebellions in the past. In Britain, no one ever talks about the examples of the English Revolution. After all, England was the first country to execute its monarchs. I remember saying this in Australia just as a throwaway line, and the whole audience started applauding, and then I remember that a lot of Irish people had called.
I don't think they heard what you said. Say it again. England was the first country.
England was the first country which decided, after a trial, to execute the king. And the French did it later, of course, and then the Russians followed. And in the United States, I think that event, the English Revolution, played a big part because a lot of the Puritans who'd come to the States before the English Revolution did have certain radical traditions. Many of them forgot those, but they existed. And that must have played a part in preventing those who wanted the United States to become a monarchy, because there were some amongst the founding fathers who were keen on that, and that was reduced. So I think, you know, to answer your question, each country has elements in its past which are heroic, as the 1916 Easter Uprising, and they have to develop it. It's a good idea.